outside of the agenda, just a couple quick introductions. First is Peggy here, who you see in the screen in mine. She's in the center left, but everyone else I know it's crazy. Peggy Connor is the official term recording secretary, Peggy?
I believe so.
Okay. So Peggy's going to be taking minutes for us, so nobody has to worry about doing that here from our end anymore. It was a huge help the other night with the Development Review Board, and we appreciate Peggy coming on board to do that. Next one, Mr. Cromer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly, if I can get myself off mute. Yes, I'm not Darla Senecal. I do play her on television sometimes, though. Yeah, I'm John Cromer, the newest member of the commission. It's great to be here, folks. Look forward to pitching in and helping out. And yes, you see Darla's name on there. She's my better half. So
Wonderful. Congrats. Welcome aboard. So the first order of business on the agenda is we need to elect a chair and co-chair, and technically clerk, and that's actually, we will discuss that further down in the line here. As you all know, both your previous co-chairs, one opted not to be reappointed. The other has opted to step down. Katie stepped down. I'd like to give her big thanks for the years that she put in on this board. She was helping getting the town plan, the energy plan, and the last two rounds of the bylaws through. She put in some long hours and a lot of good time for our commission. So I'd like to say that thank you out on the front end here. So the next step is who's going to fill her shoes. It's the role really is meeting prep. You want me to go over sort of what the responsibilities are?
I have a question. Yeah, a question, just a clarification here. The agenda we have, elect a chair, vice chair, clerk. You mentioned co-chair. Is there some clarification there, please?
Yep. So what went on in the past, and I was actually going to discuss that with you in a moment. Originally, the setup was just that model, and we really need to discuss that, the alignment of your board, first and foremost. The original rules document, for lack of better terms, that we followed, which was the policies and procedures for the Bristol, Vermont Planning Commission adopted in 2014. It talks about having of course, the chair, the vice chair, and a clerk. As things have changed over the years, the board, in the last few years, made a change to that structure and opted that the co-chair actually made more sense. It allowed people to share the responsibility instead of being a classic vice chair, where all of a sudden the chair puts the call in at 6 o'clock that night. They can't make it, and the vice chair sort of flounders through the agenda and hopes for the best. The co-chair methodology was the two would share the roles, work together, and be able to create one harmonious leadership team. The other half would be the need for a clerk. I'm not really certain that is a necessity anymore now that the town has brought Peggy on board. I do a lot of the back end as well, as far as getting your meeting materials together, and that's part of my role as zoning administrator. So I I was sort of hoping that somebody might make a motion here to possibly either modify that structure or come up with some official verbiage for a new structure if you would like.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah,
just for clarity, that policies and procedures document does say that it's a vice chairperson and clerk, one entity, one person filling the two roles, not three separate roles.
oh, that's right. That was another change that they had made a while back. So again, I think you could strike the necessity of a clerk and just elect two co-chairs this evening, and that would create a viable structure for you all.
I think for clarity, I would make the motion that we make it chair and vice chair, eliminate the clerk position.
Second.
Is there any discussion on, so the motion, Tom, was to set it up with the chair and vice chair, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
I think the co-chair idea might be a bit better, though, the way you were describing it anyway.
Let me add to that discussion. I think clarity in the position is important. So if we've got one leader rather than two, it'd be preferable in my opinion.
Well, if they
So-
share the duties as it would be for what you say, chair and co-chair, I would think, but we can call them whatever, you want, so that when there's a meeting, whatever, there's one person running the meeting.
Right. Is the current verbiage, it says in order that the efforts of the chair and the vice chair will be coordinated and both are prepared to lead the meetings, they will meet or talk by phone at least once between meetings before finalization of the next meeting agenda. So it's really asking them to work together ahead of time. And I think that verbiage actually works well. Any other input? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to keep the chair and vice chair and eliminate the clerk position, please signify by raising your hand. John? All those opposed, please raise their hand.
No, it was,
Oops, you're on mute, John.
let's try that. No, I was more in favor of having a, kind of a team approach to it as well. But it's, I'll go with the majority. It's not an issue as far as I'm concerned.
Perfect. So the motion carries. So that's the first, now that you've defined your structure. The next piece would be figuring out who's going to be the chair. Tom,
And I propose a slate.
okay. No.
I
I won't
propose,
lie, I wasn't prepared for that, but that's okay.
okay. Make a motion that we elect Kevin Hansen as chair and Jeff Lundstedt as vice chair.
So, everyone heard that? That was Kevin Hansen for chair, Jeff Lundstedt for vice chair. And do I have a second?
We do.
Mr. Sayre seconds that. Are there any other nominations on the floor? Any other nominations? Any other nomination? Okay. Any discussion?
Wasn't there a presidential candidate who said, if nominated, I will not run, if elected, I will not serve? But I'm not going to say that.
So
Oh,
LBJ.
unfortunately,
Yeah,
Jeff, You were on mute and we didn't hear that, so we didn't hear anything.
Plus, that's not the candidate you want to be, Jeff.
No,
He was not a popular one.
I think it was William Henry Harrison or somebody like that.
He's the one who gave the longest inaugural speech and then died 30 days later.
Okay. So, any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor for Kevin Hansen as chair and Jeff Lundstedt as vice chair, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Congratulations, Kevin and Jeff. With that, I'm going to hand this meeting over to your new chair, Kevin Hansen.
Thank you, I think. So with the election of officers taken care of, the next item on the agenda is to review the agenda for additions and removal, adjustment, etc. There are a couple things I would like to add or include or change on the agenda, if it's going to be okay, is underneath administrative matters. I would like to add an item update for Bristol Solar and Bristol RESS. And then underneath item 4 for continuing business, we have an action to approve the town plan, and that action or that motion could spawn a fair amount of discussion. I realize that, but I think it may be advantageous to start an informal discussion before we take that action. So I'd like to, when we get to that part, I'd like to have a discussion, if you will, as opposed to moving right into the action.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anybody else has any other clarifications, changes they would like to have entertained. Okay. So we'll move on to item 3, administrative matters. Item A, which is approval of last meeting's minutes. There is nobody that owns up to having taken them. So I believe we have no documentation of that particular meeting. So I do not believe there's any action there unless somebody has a different point of view than that. So then the next item B is the discussion of the zoning administrator's report. Chris did send out a log earlier this week or a couple days ago of his activity or permits that are active. So at this point, I guess if Chris, if you have anything additional to say, or if any of the members have any questions, you can take them.
Is there
I don't have anything to add necessarily. It's been it's been a crazy couple months, and it's only going to get busier. Building is taking off like wildfire right now, even with building costs skyrocketing. And there's some large projects that the Development Review Board is working on currently.
Does anybody have any specific questions for Chris?
I just had a question. Chris, is there anything unusual in this report that we should be paying attention to?
No, probably the biggest item on there at the moment is the Stony Hill Properties entry near the end for the subdivision and conditional use. That project is moving forward very rapidly. For those of you who aren't aware, that is a business park that's been proposed for about, 25, 30 years behind the existing fire station. It's finally coming to light. They've got, they had their first hearing for the subdivision, and next week they have their conditional use hearing and preliminary plat hearing. It's going to consist of 3 buildings, ranging 15 to 20,000 square feet of building. They have a tenant already for one of them. It's very exciting news. So this has gone from pipe dream to reality slowly, but it's literally going to happen. So very exciting.
What tenant did they have?
I don't know if they're ready to disclose
Oh.
that yet. It's a local business. It's a area business. It's not a Bristol business necessarily, but it's going to become a Bristol business. The owner is very excited to relocate his business to our area. And it's something new for our area.
The second item from the end, Parker Allison Living Trust, addition of 6 24x24 garages. Where are we talking about there?
So that would be the Robert Fuller PUD that was done in 2016 over on North Street, where
Yeah, okay.
where the homes are being built. The DRB at this point opted at their last meeting denied that application for the site plan modification for the addition of 6 additional buildings on that site. So, in speaking with Mr. Fuller, I believe that he is not going to pursue that any further. If the individual homeowners want to pursue it, they will go in front of the Development Review Board to ask for a site plan modification.
Okay.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris.
Anytime.
The next item for discussion is the town plan review by the Regional Planning Commission. I guess my question is, who knows what?
I have a tiny bit of insight for you, and it's very tiny. There was an email communication between Valerie and Andrew LaRoe from Madison County Planning, and it sounds like we just need that Bristol needs to send them a copy and request a review from Madison County Regional Planning. If that is the case, I was hoping that you all would either authorize me to go ahead and do that or authorize me to have Valerie go ahead and do that. I'm fine either direction. Or if one of you want to do it, I'm good with that too.
Kevin, it's Bill. Either Chris or Valerie could send it. And what it means is there's a provision in the original Act 88, I believe it was, passed back in 1989 as a compromise that town plans must be reviewed by the Regional Planning Commission to assure that they're consistent with the regional plan, which they almost always are, because the regional plan intends to grant a fair amount of latitude to individual towns, rightly so in my view. But the other check is with neighboring towns to make sure there's no inconsistencies or bad surprises there. So there will be a review by regional planning and then a hearing. And after that, there will be a recommendation to the Regional Planning Commission and a vote. That's what will happen.
So do I understand it's not just a review, it's an approval? They have to approve the plan? Is that what you're saying? Is that what they're doing when they vote?
In effect. As you can imagine, there was quite a lot of spirited discussion at the time 30 years ago when that was passed. But I will say this, the concerns that some people had about a top-down type of planning approval process have not been warranted. It's a cooperative spirit of mutual understanding and cooperation that's almost always worked out pretty well. Matter of fact, I couldn't think, Jeff, of a time where it hasn't.
Yeah, well, I would assume since the Regional Planning Commission was intimately involved in the generation of the plan, that it would be sort of contradictory for them to turn around and say, no, we don't like it. So do we need
Well,
to have a
The
motion?
staff was the one that worked with us, Jeff, and you know how that can be sometimes. Every so often, staff and legislative bodies disagree.
Right.
So I guess the other wrinkle or the other thing I heard is we need to communicate to the adjoining towns. So I'm not clear if that has been instituted either.
Kevin, I don't know whether the Regional Planning Commission will take care of that or whether that's Chris.
So before the Bristol vote, a copy of that plan was sent out to the surrounding towns. I did that.
And that would constitute review for them.
I believe it does. When I send it to Adam at Addison County Regional, I will confirm. And if a copy needs to be sent out, an additional copy needs to be sent out from the town, that'll be part of my duties as well.
Of course, the other wrinkle we have this time around with the town plan is they will also be reviewing an energy plan, which has a few more hooks in it than just a regular town plan. So I guess at this point, is there anybody else that has any clarifying questions? So maybe we should entertain a motion of how we're going to dispose of or move it forward.
Well, I'll move that. Chris, if somebody else wants to make the motion, that's fine with me. But
No, go ahead.
if not, I'll move that Chris send the necessary documents, which I think is just a copy of the plan, onto the Regional Planning Commission for review and scheduling in due course, scheduling our meeting with their delegation.
Second.
Any more discussion? I had a space moment there.
Not used
Due
to
to
this
the
role yet,
job,
are
I was
you?
just waiting for people to start talking. Is there any more discussion? Okay, let's bring it to a vote then. Everybody, all in favor of having Chris take the plan forward with regional planning as required, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So it passes unanimously. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.
So the other thing I wanted to insert was, it's mostly informational, but we have had presentations about a solar field on what I call the Lathrop Plateau, or the property on the other side of South Street. They have gone ahead, and actually there'll be two filings, but they've gone ahead with the Public Utility Commission, the PUC, and have filed for each one of those projects. And if just as a reminder, the solar field is a 2.2 megawatt solar generation facility, and the PUC case for that is 21-0974 as in Pat. And then the battery storage facility, which is a 2.95 megawatt battery storage facility. The PUC case for that is 210975-PET. And you can follow those on the electronic stuff from the PUC. They can send you out emails, or you can go see the case and activity, if you will. The town, I'm not sure what the select board is doing in detail, but the town does have interest there due to it's adjacent to a wellhead protection area for the village water system. The initial hearing was last night, and the schedule they've laid out for that, pending no major challenges, is they anticipate issuing permits mid-July for it. So that's, my intent was information there. I don't know if anybody has any questions or not, or should we just move on? All set?
We can move on.
Move on.
So, oh, I'm sorry, Tom, do you have a question?
No, I'm agreeing. Let's move on.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is item 4. No, I'm sorry, I'm on item 5. No, I'm on item 4 now. And then it has to do with implementing the town plan, the implementation part of the town plan. I had at a previous meeting volunteered to come up with a draft of some documentation to outline the implementation plan a little bit more concisely into a working document. I did talk with Katie a little bit before she decided not to extend her term, and massaged it a little bit based on how we had talked about that into hopefully some working documents with a master document. And the framework is pretty much that. It's all Excel spreadsheets. It's all linked in the file that Chris made for master documents for tonight's meeting. There's a master document, and then there's a series of individual files for each group that has tasks assigned to them, whether it's primary, secondary, tertiary. And the thought was they would be given those files as working documents, and as there's fields for updating and that sort of thing, prioritization. And as they work those issues, if they make comments and stuff, those files could be recollected and that information fed into a master sheet, if you will. So I wanted to kind of back up a little bit and have an overview of that, kind of a discussion. If it makes sense, doesn't make sense, if we should modify the thing before we do a formal motion. So floor is anybody that has an issue or a question.
I guess my question is, oh, go ahead.
Yep. Very general question. Where am I finding copies of the working documents at this point?
I will email those to you right now, John. I sent them out before they approved your seating, and I oversaw.
No worries. No worries. That way I can jump right on that and review that and have some idea what we're talking about.
I have a question. You were talking about prioritizing. How is that going to be indicated on the documents?
So the documents,
Because I looked and I didn't really see anything for that.
yeah, I think what happens is I put everybody has a third tab with the original document, and you can see, you can go in, for instance, the select board could go in and see where in the scheme for that particular item, what responsibility they have. I was just being lazy because I didn't want to go through all these documents and list them out individually because I couldn't figure out how else to do it. So it's kind of a little bit backwards in the sense that you'd have to go back to that third tab and
Right.
see where you lie within that action item.
But I mean, when we start putting things in there, how can we show they're prioritized within like just the planning commission
Okay, so
spreadsheet?
there's
I mean, can we do some kind of color line coding of some kind?
you could do there is a column for prioritization, so you could my thought was you just go one to whatever.
Maybe I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think there is a column for that, or there are quite a few of the fields are locked, so you don't lose the translation
Right.
capability to the master one. But any of those other fields you could color or
see.
whatever you want.
Yeah, I see a schedule, but column, which is
It's
column
column
G.
G. It's
But I meant as far as a working document, like what's being worked on currently. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you know what I mean. Like we're going to work on this now. We're going to work on this in a month or 2 months or however.
Okay.
That is, I see where it says your schedule, like 3 years, 5 years, ongoing,
Yeah.
that kind
So
of thing.
column G
Yeah.
is a priority column. So my thought was there is you just number these things, and then you could sort based on those numbers, 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Yeah, it'd have to be just, take years. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know how you can do that.
And then, intuitively, some of this stuff is ongoing, some of it's 1 year, some of it's 5 years, but
Right, I see.
depending on, the whatever the body is, maybe the 1 year thing's over one, is this high priority or low priority or
Yeah,
You
that's,
whatever,
because I mean, when it says 3 years, 3 years from when? 3 years from now, and then in a year, does that change to 2 years? I mean,
Oh, I would assume it's static from the issue of the plan.
okay.
So the plan is a 5-year document, I think. And so,
Isn't it 8 now?
it might be. So if it's a 8-year document, the first 3 years you should be working on X, or the first 5 years, or some of that stuff is you just keep working on it,
Okay.
So, Kevin, if I count correctly, there are 14 action items for the planning commission. So is our goal to, as Melissa said, prioritize them and then decide how to work on a particular one? Or what are we trying to do is my question. How do we go about dealing with this?
So there's I'm sorry. So there's multiple facets here. One is to understand, I think, or the intent is when I came up with this concept, one was how do we communicate it out to other responsible parties, and then have a document that we can somehow manage what's going on. And then the other thing would be, what are we going to do ourselves amongst us kids? And I would imagine we will have a discussion over a meeting or maybe a few meetings that would everybody would be contemplating priorities, and we as a board would be distilling that into our direction over the next, well, probably several years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we can't work on 14 items at once.
Yeah.
That's clear.
And there was
That's
interest.
what I was thinking of. Is you have so many that are 3 years, so many that are 5 years, but what do we want to work on now? What's the next one? And then somehow maybe color those, just color the line so we know, assign colors, and we know what's people will know what's currently being worked on, like the immediate one.
I think, yeah, I think I get what you're saying, Melissa, is that, kind of use like a red, yellow, green, kind of
Kind of
pick
thing,
any three
yeah.
colors. Red being those items that are the hottest, most important issues that we decided that we need to
Right.
work on, attack first. Yellow, and then, green, and then on down the line, and move, obviously
Right,
things would move
exactly.
up as time goes on, and as we complete other tasks.
Right, right. And really just the tab that, sorry, the column that says who's responsible. So under planning commission, I mean, that could be where we put the color. So if you don't want to put it all across the whole thing to make it, kind of difficult to read, we could do that, or we could put a tab and before A that's just for color coding.
Another part in that document it's kind of a status thing. It's rather simplistic. Is all the way to the left. There's a I call a meatball chart, but it's basically it clicks in every quarter of completion, if you will. And then there's a spot where you can put numerically what the percentage completion is in column A. And then column B, when that number gets above 25, 50, 75%, it'll automatically color that little circle in. So you can graphically see where progress is being made that way as well.
What is on that one, implementation plan actions? What is that gray thing in the middle? Are those the columns? It looks like I guess that's just, is that part of the spreadsheet?
Yeah, so on the spreadsheets that go out, the grade information is locked and non-editable.
Okay.
So that when we pull that information back, it'll still have the right formatting to go into the master sheet.
Oh, okay. Right. It confused me a little because there were no lines. Every other section has, the I don't even know what you call it.
We can get lines in there. It's just
it was a little confusing for me when I just looked at it at a glance. So
yeah, I think it's just a matter of when I shaded those boxes, you lost the background grid.
Right. And I did have one other question though, and it's on the let me look at it while I'm doing it. When it's oh my gosh, I know the primary group that's responsible, primary responsible, secondary. Now, is that something that for secondary is at the request of the primary? Otherwise, we don't particularly do anything, or how does that work?
So if you go back to the original plan, it lists multiple groups and many tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And to develop this sheet, I took whoever was listed first is primary, the next person secondary, and the third party that in that description is tertiary. And there was nothing that was ever assigned more than 3 people. So I think there's a lot of gray area there when you get right down to it. And I don't know, quite honestly, through the process, how much of this was communicated out to some of these different boards. I know there was some discussion with some of them, but, so there may be some bantering back and forth as to if the order of who's heading, quote unquote, heading because they're primary, if that's fair or not. So, this is the intent is to have it as a working document,
Right. Is that something that is there a time when the select board and all the commissions are gathered together to have a meeting? Sorry, I'm not familiar with. You know what I'm saying? How do we get together and say, okay, you're the primary. So what does the secondary do? And what does the tertiary do? has that been discussed?
I'm not
Yeah.
aware, and other board members should jump in, but I'm not aware of any sort of big meeting where boards come across there. I do know that the select board has, each member of the select board has, I don't know if you want to call it a responsibility, but they're assigned various boards. So all the sub boards are reviewed, or there's a contact point, if there will. And I think, you know, there's a lot of philosophical discussion here that probably should happen as we walk down this path. And I think as we, you know, as we start thinking about this too, I think there should be some discussion about how we handle this compared, and maybe even look over the shoulder to some other boards in the area and see how they're implementing things. Because I think
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, this is new area to attempt to address. And I don't want to say things, and I'm not sure I should say this, but I don't think implementation plans were necessarily actively worked on in any organization, in an organized manner in the past. I don't, Bill,
I
or
mean, the last, you know, I just know that the last several years, there's been issues with, you know, boards not talking to each other, or commissions or whatever, not talking to each other. And the information getting from a board to the select board or vice versa. And so that's what I'm saying. I mean, is it something where the select board maybe would make the decisions as to, if you're the primary, this is what you do. If you're the secondary, this is your responsibility. Or should we have a meeting of everyone in all the commissions, all the boards, and the select board? Of course, we probably couldn't do that on Zoom because it would just be too many.
yeah, potentially. I mean, and that's what I was alluding to before, that there's probably, this is probably fodder for, you know, way past this meeting. This is kind of a get our
Right.
feet wet type thing, but there's a lot of interesting points you're raising, Melissa, and how we do that, you know, and how we communicate out on our own as opposed to trying to draw other people in, is all in a state of flux with a new charter for the planning commission as well as new officers. Jeff.
So maybe someone who's been around longer can tell us how implementation has been implemented in the past, if at all.
It
Anyone?
hasn't.
Hasn't. Okay, that's what I thought.
I mean, I'm just thinking, it just seems like if we really want to, I mean, this whole, the spreadsheet and this, I mean, this is a great idea. The shared documents will, I think, help everyone. And it's all about communication. So I think at some point, everybody that's on any board, we all need to be together and discuss and decide how we're going to do things, how we're going to, who's going to prioritize what, and implementation, and make sure that things keep moving forward. I mean, just to have a real base group of what everybody thinks, everybody has input, and maybe in the end, if there's any controversy or any decision to be made, the select board would decide.
Jeff, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I'll let Tom go first because I've been talking.
Okay, thank you.
Listening to Melissa's proposal there, I think it's a smart idea. And yeah, too many people to get together at one time, but can we liaise with the other boards, with say a member, representative from our board, and each board have somebody that kind of coordinates the effort?
And maybe just all the chairmans need to have a meeting,
There you go.
you know, just to kind of at least start getting communication going.
So I had two comments. One is that, and I'm drawing partly from what Melissa was saying and Tom, that it would seem to me that if we're going to set priorities, there should be a discussion at the least with the select board, because if we set off to do something that they're not interested in, then we waste our time.
Yeah.
And the second is that, as I said, there's 14 items there. And I know from experience in doing plans that if you have 14 priorities, you have no priorities. So we would.
I think is that 14, but counting also secondary, us as a
No,
secondary?
that's just the primary, I think.
Was
So,
it? Okay,
anyway,
I thought I got 12.
Anyway, my thought was that as part of this process, we should
Yeah.
decide on 2 or at most 3 items that we would want to work on now, because otherwise you spread yourself too thin and you're just not prioritizing.
Anybody else? Bill, have you got any thoughts?
Well, I think every point that's been made so far has some validity to it. I think that most of the implementation items are ones that at some point in our discussions in the past 2 or 3 years, we thought were important enough to record on paper. And yes, I think we should pick out 2 or 3 and as a commission that we agree are at the top of the list and work on them. I also think it's a good idea for either the chairs of the various boards to stay in touch with each other, or there be one particular person who's a liaison. Normally that would be the chair, but it doesn't have to be. My experience with very large meetings is that about as much gets done as when you have 14 priorities. So I don't recommend that. But I suppose, Kevin, my recommendation would be for the chairs to confer with each other from time to time so they can spot any possible difficulties or either overreach or incompatibilities, and we can resolve them, strive to resolve them. Number one, and number two, that yes, pick out 2 or 3 priorities on which we can agree, and then put those on our list for this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Let's go around a little bit and hear from some people that haven't talked. Lloyd, do you have any thoughts?
Hear me out?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think there's a couple ideas there. One, keeping the items down to 2 or 3 at this point is probably more than enough. Having, whether it's chairman or a representative meeting with other committees, it's probably another good idea to kind of get the thread going through all the way through the community structure. Yeah, there's another point I was thinking of, but I kind of lost that for the moment. But yeah, I think there's some good ideas coming out here.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
So I agree that we need to narrow focus to move forward, obviously. As far as communicating, we need to obviously pass it along in some form. Good job, Kevin, with setting this up and formatting this the way you have to try to pass this along and coordinate with everyone and make it usable. As far as coordinating with everyone else and working on priorities together to figure out what priorities are, that can get cumbersome and be very difficult. I think that, I don't know if we were talking about just focusing on the planning commission's tasks when we were talking about prioritizing, or all of the implementation tasks across the board. I think that we should try to narrow our focus and decide what we're going to tackle and how we're going to tackle it and move forward with clear objectives. Otherwise, we might as well just set this aside and move on to something else.
So I'm not, you talked about the planning commission having objectives, but then objectives across the whole implementation plan. So I didn't come away clear if you were promoting to each group to have their objectives clearly or across the implementation plan.
Well, I was referring to those that are assigned to, say, the select board or conservation commission, those sorts of tasks. That is what I was referring to there. Just that, it's easy to get lost in the weeds because there's so much there.
Thank you. John, do you have any thoughts?
I guess just to clarify a bit, I agree with everything we've put out so far. And I guess I'm kind of piggybacking on Rob is are we going to take our list of priorities, the planning commission list, and attack that first? I guess from a if I'm just going right back to grassroots, we are the planning commission, so it would make sense to me to work from our own list first, and of course decide what we as a commission want to do off of our list, and attack those items first, but being flexible enough and being adaptable enough to be able to move and shake. And if another commission or another board pops up and wants to enlist us to do something else or wants us to move in a different direction, I think so. We kind of have I see it as kind of a twofold process for us here is to press ahead with our own agenda, with our own list, and yet be available and be adaptable enough to dive in and help out, or dive in and change tack if we have to to assist in another task that isn't on our specific list.
So I guess. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I think kind of a 30,000 foot overview of it, and I'm just and I'm reading this document off of my phone too, so it's my eyes are crossed at this point, but.
So I guess one of the things I'm starting to understand with you and Rob is, while the planning commission may have a clear set of priorities that they distill, if another group ends up creating the same 2-3 priorities from their list, there could be some interactive responsibility or distractions, if you will. So I guess at that point, you'd have to negotiate perhaps as to if that's a priority, important enough for one group that they take lead on it, or maybe something, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Is that the concern I heard from both you, Rob, and John about?
My concern is that it wasn't clear when we were talking about liaising with all the other commissions and groups. It wasn't clear whether our focus was going to be on the planning commission's task, the implementation table solely, and not getting lost in all the tasks that are assigned to all of the other entities. And that's where I was looking for some clarity on.
Well, in my mind, it was our responsibilities that I was talking about, prioritizing. But one thing that's the thing that John was talking about. that's why I want to know, what does primary mean? What does secondary mean? What does tertiary mean? Does that mean we do stuff on our own, or does that mean we don't do anything unless the primary requests that our commission or whatever, whoever is secondary, help them with something? That's, I think, when if all the representatives from all the commissions or boards get together to decide on that and how that's going to work, because we don't need to be working on something unless they need us to, then we shouldn't be on our radar at this point.
So if I understand what you're saying,
Right.
if we need to we need to reassess how these things have been arbitrarily assigned as far as priority.
Well,
On the
as far as
master list.
who it's going to, the primary, secondary, tertiary,
Yep, yep, okay,
yeah,
fair point.
or maybe assessed. I don't know if it's.
So Tom or Jeff, you've inputted a little bit. Do you have any more?
Well, I mean, I was thinking mainly of looking at what we're set up to do, our
Yeah.
tasks, because after all, there are tasks, and we don't have any authority over other commissions to say, as far as I can see, nor should we, to say, hey, you're not doing your task. They might want to
No.
discuss with them what they're doing. But I would think that our main thing would be to say, okay, of these 14 tasks, what should we and can we work on starting now? I mean, starting now, not obviously not right now. And then I'm not sure whether we would first look at it and then go to the select board and say, here's our thoughts, this is what we'd like to work on, what do you think of this? Or if we wanted to show the tasks to the select board first and say, what do you think is important? I'd rather not do that. I think that invites
Yeah.
more trouble than it's worth. But that's what I would propose, that at least we think about doing, is we can all look at this list and say, okay, what would we want to do and how would we do it? And then see if we can agree on that, and then we could move forward from there in a way which we hope would be efficient and would maybe produce some results.
Agreeable with everything so far, and I'm actually encouraged that we're actually going to take some affirmative action on these items that apparently have been overlooked or not even addressed in the past. And I think we should, as maybe a subject for the next meeting or whatever, is to narrow down to 2 or 3 or 4 of these primary things that we could focus on, rather than a scattershot sort of deal. So I think the
Yeah.
short point to this is like,
Absolutely.
let's focus and
Yep.
and pick out some things and take action.
Thank you. So a lot of good discussion. What I'm hearing, few things I'm hearing is, well, let me ask the group if we're ready to say this is the format that we want to work with, or do we want to take the time between now and next meeting and scrub it a little bit, which would effectively, I'm getting back to our process here, which would effectively mean that we would table the action. I think we want to get that straight. I think the other thing I'm hearing is we want to set up some multi-board or multi-function task force, if you will, that would be assigned people or leads that would start talking cross boards and getting some sort of cross-pollination, if you will, and then to develop the details for a few priorities at a time. Rob, did you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering, so the 14 items that were set out as planning commission implementation actions, those were where planning commission was primary, correct?
Right.
So
Well,
is it necessary to set up liaison task force if that's the case, or if we don't decide to work on anything immediately where there's anybody else assigned to that. If we say we're going to tackle these three things and we are the only entity that's involved with it, then it's kind of a moot point.
First, if I could just say something, Melissa. First, I would not assume that they're all our priority alone. Personally, I would want to go back through the list and distill it and make sure that's true, because I simply don't remember. But anyway, Melissa.
Okay, my idea of getting people together was just an initial thing so that you go over the spreadsheet, how it works, if everyone agrees on it, so that everybody uses it and that all the commissions and boards use it, and to do exactly what you're saying. It is the agree on, but this is planning commission, this is energy commission, this is whatever it is, that if you're together, you agree who is the whose responsibility each action is. And then we can go from there. We can prioritize, we can start working on things. But I think unless they're all like I said, all the representatives, whoever they are, get together and go through each one and say, this belongs to the planning commission. Nobody else is going to work on this, or this belongs to whichever one. That was my idea of the meeting. Not necessarily that they're going to meet every month and they're going to prioritize each other. It's just communication,
Right,
and clarification.
Okay, thanks. So let me see where I started summarizing here. So I'm thinking that we'd have some sort of cross meeting, if you will, with a few key people. We said that we would encourage everybody to take a sizable chunk, and then we'd be cautious about interdependencies. Is that some distill it pretty well, or am I missing something? Okay.
Pretty much.
So I think through that discussion, we've also kind of talked about, I guess the next thing to do would be I'd entertain a motion to table approving the implementation action items.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, is there any hate to ask this, but is there any more discussion?
Can I say one thing, Kevin? I knew a chair of a board who had a very useful thing to say at a time like this. He would say, does anyone have anything to say that hasn't been said already?
Only new information.
Yeah.
Okay, let's formalize this with a vote then. Everybody in favor of tabling it? Aye, yes, raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. And then I would also assert that discussion item B and C we've already talked about, as they were all intertwined. So
Yep.
I think if anybody, unless anybody objects, we'll move on to item 5, which is new. Oh, I'm
Can I
sorry,
ask
Jeff.
one question, Kevin, before we go? Because it is something new. And it's a question for Chris, or maybe we have to ask the Regional Planning Commission. I'm not sure. That some of these items, to work on them, require sort of technical expertise, which we wouldn't have. And whom would we call on for that, and how would we do it?
It's really looking for finding a subject matter expert in that field. You do have money budgeted for planning consultants. So one of the ones that was out there that was a hot button from before was the mining piece, where they had already dealt with extraction, but mining was a question that needed to be answered, and maybe finding somebody in that field to be able to come in and work with you to come up with a strategy for that. So As you come up with strategies, if you want me to research or if you all want to do research, I'm more than willing to help out with that. So,
Okay, that's great. That's just good to know. That was an information item.
Okay, so let's move on to item 5, new business. So technically, the month of May, which is our next meeting, is our reorganizational annual meeting. We've kind of preempted that a little bit by electing officers this month as opposed to next. But I would ask that everybody take a look at the bylaws. We bantered around a little bit tonight at the beginning as to whether we want, how we want it, what sort of an officer structure we want. That kind of detail, it may seem like insignificant, but we should figure out how to make those bylaws reflect what we're actually doing. So if everybody could take a look at those
Kevin,
and excuse me.
just quick, when you say the bylaws, you mean the planning commission policies and procedure document?
Yes.
Okay. John, I'll send that to you right now.
And I think if you read it, technically the only opportunity to massage these things is at the annual meeting. So no pressure, of course. But there are a few things in there that make me scratch my head, and I would like to get input from others. I don't know if anybody has any comments or anything to say preemptively about considering those or not.
Well, I've taken a quick look at it. I think it could use a few changes. But we can discuss it next time once everyone has a chance to go over it.
Yeah. Bring
Yeah.
proposals.
Kevin or Jeff, do either of you have an example that you'd like us to be considering before we next meet?
Well, I don't think I want to consider it now, since you ask, Bill. Is that?
No, not considering it today,
Oh,
but
but
that
just
you
give-
would like us
do
to
that.
consider before our next meeting.
Sure. Okay. So one which strikes me as the somewhat awkward position that we were put in now, that the terms of people end in March, but the officers are elected in May. And we saw
Yeah.
the outcome, the potential outcome, which in this case happened, where since Katie's term ended, we had nobody to, well, Chris graciously stepped in. But it just, I would think we would simply make it that the chair and the vice are elected in March.
That's a good example. Kevin, do you have one in mind?
There's a few outdated comments in there that obviously is just housekeeping, but the other one that bothers me a little bit in there is somebody's supposed to be keeping a record book of relevant communications. And from my point of view, our minutes should be our relevant communications, and we shouldn't be having some little book off to the side that might or may not get things. So there's a few things like that that just beg for inconsistency, if you will. But there's a lot of good things in there, and the other one is exactly what Jeff said. Is our organizational meeting is completely out of sync with any other board experience I've ever seen. So,
Okay, thank you.
Would a possibility also be to, as Jeff had said, either we elect the officers in March or have the terms extend to the May timeframe? What would be involved with that? Is that something that can or can't be done? Or either way, it would sync everything up for an annual meeting.
so and now you're in the bailiwick of the select board, and so I'm not sure if we being the tail want to wag the dog, but I mean, maybe we do.
Understood. That's,
We can
I
make
know
a,
some people. I know a guy.
Yeah.
I know.
Which part of the dog are you calling me, Kevin?
That's an old saying. I don't know if it's a Vermont one or not, but it's an old saying.
there was a movie back in the 90s that
Yeah,
had that name.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think we can make a recommendation and that may be a policy we'll want to follow with all of these issues for boards that are not us. We have a recommendation, but obviously we don't make decisions for other people. At least not other boards.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some food for thought. And the other item is, well, when I wrote this agenda, we had 2 openings. I think we're down to 1. So it's obviously it'd be a great thing to have that one filled as well. And I would encourage, and sometimes it takes shoulder tapping as opposed to just a general request. I would urge people to look at the board and look at who we are, not, and look at a few of the, I don't know if I want to get into profiling, but like the age, our age group,
Gender.
gender, exactly. That's a great one right there. Village dwellers versus townies and, some of that kind of stuff, but, give it some careful thought and, tap on a few shoulders.
Yeah. Good idea.
So, we got through that one. So I guess at this point, we're on to public comment. I don't know if do we have anybody interested in giving public comment?
I think we need to hear from Jim.
No? Yes?
Peanut gallery.
I have nothing to say. You do
Well,
a fine job. The only advice I can give you guys is don't make things too complicated. Just worry about the planning commission and do your thing, and that's it. I did over 25 years or so to the town with absolutely no recognition. So good luck,
Yeah.
guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Doesn't
Thank
have
you,
any,
Deb.
it doesn't have anything to do with the planning commission, but as also with the public, man, they did a great job cleaning the sidewalks today, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they went on Main Street, they went to the buildings and cleaned everything. So it was great.
Yeah. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I'll also move, but as we do so, Melissa, does that mean you're gonna promise us we're not gonna have another snowstorm?
I can't, who knows with the climate the way it is, but hopefully not.
Well, you
Oh
know,
my gosh.
Tom?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I think we got all sorts of people. So everybody in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you all.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Thanks.
Have a great
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
See you all in a month.
Thank you.
If not sooner.
Everyone.